Hello, and welcome to My Bolty UV. This is Jim, and we're going from point A to point B. Climb in. Let's go. The world is on the attack. They are attacking conservatives, they are attacking liberals, they're attacking EVs, they are attacking ICE vehicles. It is incredibly easy to divide people into groups, cliques, or beliefs. But this video isn't about that. This video is about fact-checking the outright lies that surround EV ownership. Today, we have FUD, lies, and big oil's ultimate demise. Hang on. Today, let's do something a bit different. My job as a weather forecaster in the United States Air Force led me to becoming a very analytical and skeptical person. I can listen to just about anything or anyone and tell you when their words are the truth or when they are full of lies. It comes from years of looking at facts and doing my own statistical analysis of a plethora of scientific data. It's called the scientific process. I still use it on the job that I do today, working in the engineering field as a technical writer. I take spec sheets, detailed schematics and diagrams, pictures, drawings, and many interviews with engineers, and I cull it down into a technical manual for use by maintenance technicians and operators. We call this process technical publications, but in reality it is fact-checking at its finest. It is digging out the facts from a mixture of factual and non-factual information and putting it into a document that is only fact-filled. So let's talk about this for just a minute. How do you fact-check anything? There are fact checkers out there who are literally bought and paid for to produce information that is factually incorrect about someone who opposes their cause. And in the case of this video, I will address the most egregious one, big oil and coal. You have social media deeply involved in this industry because all social media platforms are for-profit businesses. And they will take the most money they can get from the biggest suppliers of that money, and in this case, we're talking about big oil and coal. This is why platforms like YouTube prevent regular people like you and me from making money on their platforms until they've reached a certain level of subscribers and viewers. This way, they make all the profits from the smaller and less watched channels without having to share a single dime. I will not get into the politics of personal destruction, but the political system here in the USA, and dare I say the entire free world, is about finding dirt on your perceived enemy and using it for leverage against them. This dirt is thrown into a mishmash of fact checks, and the fact checkers come out in force to use this dirt to destroy the opponent. It's disgusting and pathetic. How do you as an individual get past this? You become better educated. And I don't mean going to school to get a degree. I mean educate yourself in the tactics used by people who want to sway your opinion and those who want to make you believe things that are just patently false. You can educate yourself to become a fact checker. And here's how. 1. Be skeptical of everything, including what you see on my channel. Stop and ask yourself, is this true? Especially if it confirms existing biases and when it triggers anger or fear. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD, are the outcomes that they are hoping for. 2. Content type. Check the content type. What is the purpose? Is it an advertisement disguised as information? Is it satire disguised as news? Is it an opinion piece? Or is it full of factual information you can readily confirm from non-biased sources? Not the news media either. We all know that the news media is slanted and biased. One only need to watch the election coverage from the past 20 years to know that this is a factual statement. Number 3, look laterally, left and right. What do others say? Open multiple browsers and watch multiple videos on the subject. If there's no source for their claims, challenge them to produce the source. Is it something you can readily check for accuracy and bias using independent sources that are 100% trustworthy? Is it something that common sense tells you is accurate? Number 4, look for red flags. One key red flag is signs of low quality. Are they using a bot to read the script? Look for name calling. Look for inflammatory language. Look for misspellings. And this is especially troublesome with data that is being interjected into social media from unsavory, non-English speaking sources that do not have freedom as their first concern. Also look for grammatical errors. Again, when bots read, they mispronounce words. Granted, I make speaking errors all the time, but I'm a real human being. Stick around, because I'm putting together a studio and will be on camera soon enough, and then you'll see how real I really am. Fear, uncertainty, doubt, also known as FUD. The oil industry was the most powerful force on earth 100 years ago. If you don't know the history of Standard Oil, I challenge you to do some research on your own. I will not bother to rehash what is easy to find in history books and videos all over YouTube. Today, the big oil industry is out for blood. They are the number one purveyor of FUD regarding the EV revolution that is taking the world by storm. Uncertainty and doubt are everywhere. There have been motorheads on this page making comments about negative things regarding both EUV and EV and electric vehicles in general. If you do simple research on YouTube for the name Mark Mills, a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, you will find more than one video where he is testifying about the negative impact of EVs or outright lying about why they will never replace the internal combustion engine. Again, uncertainty and doubt. These types never provide you with all the facts. They only give you half-truths. For example, when Mark Mills was recently testifying before Congress, he said that you are only reducing CO2 emissions somewhere between 15 and 20% when you operate an EV. That's an outright lie. Before you continue with this video, and while you are paused, watch the 3 videos that I have linked in the comments below in their entirety, and then come back here and continue. I have a special response for one of those videos. 2 of them were provided by ExxonMobil, and the other one was by Prager University, and it's entitled, "What's Wrong with Wind and Solar?" Thank you for pausing and watching those videos. I want to go back into one of the biggest oil and gas anti-EV videos there is, where Mark Mills denigrates wind and solar. I'm going to go through that video point by point today and provide a fact check on the information Mark provided in this video. The video is titled, "What's Wrong with Wind and Solar?" As promised, I will address Mark in his entirety and go point by point to fact check his assertions. Here we go. I have a deep and profound respect for Prager University. They do a wonderful job of keeping us all informed about our civic duties and our God-given natural rights as citizens in this great nation. However, they're not perfect. Every once in a great while, I run across things on their YouTube channel that make me think somebody is asleep at the wheel. When they miss the mark, they miss big. Let's see if they have the wherewithal to address the mistakes in one of their videos, and that video is entitled, "What's Wrong with Wind and Solar?" I've provided a link to their video in the description and hope you've watched it by now. I will not cut their video into this response for fear of being marked by YouTube for copyright infringement. I will read their transcript word for word and provide my response. And I make the claim for fair use and ask that I be granted all the rights guaranteed under that claim. If, however, YouTube fails under the pressure, I will re-edit this video without quoting the false claims of their subject video. The speaker for Prager University in this video is Mark Mills, a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. He has a Bachelor of Science with honors in physics from Queen's University in Ontario, Canada. He has worked for Bell Labs and RCA, with most of his work in microprocessors, fiber optics, missile guidance, and other similar areas. I have nothing personal against him and wish him the best going forward. However, the video he made for Prager University is chock full of red herrings, misinformation, and easily disproven asserted conclusion. The video opens with Mark stating this: "Have you ever heard of unobtainium? It is the magical energy mineral found on the planet Pandora in the movie Avatar. It's a fantasy and a science fiction script, but environmentalists think they found it here on the Earth in the form of wind and solar power. They think all the energy we need can be supplied by building enough wind and solar farms and enough batteries. So here's my response. I asked the question, are wind and solar not the best way to go? Question mark? Seriously? I know they're not perfect, but they are better than the do-nothing, let's burn and drill until it's all gone way to go. For this simple truth, it does not take a degree in science. I don't think wind is the greatest way to go, but solar would have a big impact over time if we diverted more time and attention to improving the implementation of the solution. I'm not advocating that we stop drilling for oil or digging for coal tomorrow. I want us to use the oil and coal that we need for the next 20 to 30 years to invest in making renewable energy sources better, faster, and cheaper. I'm also for using more nuclear if needed, until we can wean ourselves off the debilitating use of oil, natural gas, and coal. Not reducing our dependence on fossil fuels is like not plugging a leak in your roof because it only rains occasionally. The longer we wait, the more likely we are to irreversibly damage our planet. And for the record, the only responsible use for fossil fuels is their use to create better ways to obtain energy we need from renewable, sustainable, and recyclable resources going forward. Period. Mark continues in the video. He says, "The simple truth is that we can't, nor should we want to, not if our goal is to be good stewards of the planet. To understand why, consider some simple physics realities that aren't being talked about. All sources of energy have limits that can't be exceeded. The maximum rate at which the sun's photons can be converted to electrons is about 33%. Our best solar technology is at 26% efficiency. For wind, the maximum capture is 60%, and our best machines are at 45%, so we're pretty close in terms of wind and solar limits." So my response to Mark in this case is agreed on the points of energy efficiency only. But why didn't you address the batteries at this point? Never mind, let's just continue. Mark then continues with this: "Despite PR claims about big gains coming, there just aren't any possible. And wind and solar only work when the wind blows and the sun shines. But we need energy all the time. The solution, we're told, is to use batteries. Again, physics and chemistry make this very hard to do. Consider the world's biggest battery factory, the one Tesla built in Nevada. It would take 500 years for the factory to make enough batteries to store just one day's worth of America's electrical needs." Okay, my response is this. You finally talked about batteries. But what you gave is a red herring analogy. Your way of thinking about this response is not the right way to think about things. Tesla isn't making batteries to store energy primarily for your house. Their primary use of batteries is to get you from point A to point B. 2, lithium-ion batteries are getting better, but this is an entirely different point. Your claim is a diversionary tactic used by the oil and coal industry to make the claim that they, and they alone, have the only source of reliable and cheap energy. What you did not mention is there are new battery technologies on the horizon that would store enough energy for the entire nation in an area that is less than 100 square miles, which is far smaller than the area taken up by the fossil fuel power plants today. There are bigger and better ways to store energy, to provide electricity, that science has just begun to explore. Water cell batteries come to mind. It would involve a chemistry that is non-toxic and inexpensive. Nobody has ever suggested that Tesla Gigafactory be used to make batteries for electrical grids. Sure, there have been some experimentations with Tesla batteries, but nothing that would warrant this analogy. Oh, and by the way, Tesla provided information at their Battery Day 2020, specifically that their Gigafactory would increase their total output by 10 to 20-fold over the next 2 years, so from 2020 to 2022. They actually surpassed that estimate. It has increased 50-fold since 2020. This is something Mark said was just not possible. That's FUD at its finest. Mark goes on to say, This explains why wind and solar currently still supply less than 3% of the world's energy, after 20 years and billions of dollars in subsidies. There are a couple things I want to say in response to that. First of all, it's a lot more than 3% here in the United States, but that's beside the point. The advances in solar are important because the resources needed to make these panels are cheap and easy to find. As for disposing of the used panels, up to 90% of the material in a solar panel can be recycled, not put in landfills, as you intimate later. This is just one of your many red herring analogies. Well, the next thing that Mark says is, putting aside the economics, if your motive is to protect the environment, you might want to rethink wind, solar, and batteries because, like all machines, they're built from non-renewable materials. Consider some sobering numbers. A single electric car battery weighs about a half ton. Fabricating one requires digging up, moving, and processing more than 250 tons of earth somewhere on our planet. My response to this, what you said is patently false. This was the case over a decade ago, but now it does not take that much effort at all. Not to mention, virtually 100% of the materials used in wind, solar, and batteries are fully recyclable, not the asserted non-renewable that Mark alluded to. However, fossil fuels are one of 4 non-renewable energy sources. Those are oil, natural gas, coal, and nuclear. The batteries in all electric cars are 90% recyclable today, and that number will stretch to over 95% over the next 2 to 3 years. So let's do the math for the life cycle of the material in a used car, and we'll use his 250 tons. So 1, 250 tons, 2, 90% recycled, which means 3, only 25 tons are needed for the next cycle. But these are fake numbers. The reality is the amount of energy used to make an electric car is about the same as it is for a traditional gas car. This is true for all components except the motion components. And then there's a split. Even using the fabricated 250 tons that Mark alludes to, the typical gasoline car averages about 20 miles to the gallon. At 200,000 miles, this car will have used 10,000 gallons of fuel, and 10,000 gallons of gasoline weighs 63,000 pounds, and this is 63,000 pounds of gasoline is 31.5 tons. Additionally, you will pump about 400,000 pounds of CO2 into the atmosphere, and then you have to consider the lethal petroleum chemical byproducts that have been disposed of in our land and air. You also have to add the energy that is consumed to bring each gallon of gas out of the earth, up the well, to the refinery, to the distribution center, then to the gasoline truck, and ultimately to the tank at your local gas station. And finally, the electricity it takes to pump the gas into your car. As you can see, the energy required to build and keep a gasoline car on the road adds up. It's not just the $5 storage for a barrel of oil that Mark will mention later, and it continues to multiply generation after generation. But for an electric vehicle, the energy required to build it is more than 90% recycled into the next generation of electric cars. So you dig up the resources only one time, as opposed to burning gallon after gallon of gasoline into infinity or until it runs out. For EVs, the need for new material decreases over time. Not to mention, the amount of material will decrease as designs change. But who needs to rely on facts, right? Mark then digs himself a big hole. He says, building a single 100 megawatt wind farm, which can power 75,000 homes, requires some 30,000 tons of iron ore and 50,000 tons of concrete, as well as 900 tons of non-recyclable plastic for the huge blades. To get the same power from solar, the amount of cement and steel and glass needed is 150% greater. So my response is simple. Your assertion on wind farms is pretty much spot on. They are not the best thing for our environment, but they are still better than fossil fuels. However, your assertion that solar is not worth it is dead wrong. I want to address your claim that about 900 tons of non-recyclable plastics are used for the blades on a wind system. I don't dispute the amount. However, the claim that plastics are non-recyclable is ludicrous. Anyone with more than a 5th grade education knows that plastics are fully recyclable. Moving on into the solar arena, we know that the majority of the elements needed to make a solar panel are readily available with little mining required. Secondly, the installations do not require the infrastructure you conclude unless you're talking about solar farms, which in a lot of ways are a waste. The best way to implement solar is by installing solar panels on existing buildings. This would reduce the need for cement and steel by 95%. So let's be honest about the requirements. Don't just single out something that is your pet peeve and stick to it and base it out there as a fact, because it's not. Mark must really like fish because he goes on with another red herring analysis. Then there are the other materials needed, including elements known as rare earth metals. With current plans, the world will need an incredible 200 to 2,000% increase in mining for elements such as cobalt, lithium, dysprosium, and just to name a few. Where's all this stuff going to come from? Massive new mining operations. Almost none of it in America, some imported from places hostile to America, and some in places we all want to protect. So let me respond to this the only way I know how. For solar panels, there are a few minerals that cannot be easily obtained. But one of the most important elements is gallium arsenide, and it is a byproduct of smelting. Using this element is a green process. We're going to be smelting for a long time. We need steel and other iron components, and it's also recyclable. Silicon is the most abundant element in the mix, and it does not require mining per se. Combine the installation of solar panels on existing buildings and homes with the fact that the panels are almost 100% recyclable, and you have one of the best sources of renewable energy to ever exist. And I will address your concern about cobalt later. It's also a red herring. Again, let's not get the facts in the way of an asserted conclusion. Let's just get it out there. And the most important thing of all, we all want to protect the environment, not just the areas around mining operations. The amount of secondary pollutants spewed into the atmosphere by burning petroleum and coal products is immeasurable. And those pollutants land all over our planet from the air and are dumped into our water supplies by big coal and the petroleum-based pesticide companies that make chemicals for which there is no half-life. They last forever. Mark just couldn't help himself. He had to go down under. He says, Australia's Institute for Sustainable Future cautions that a global gold rush for energy minerals will take miners into, quote-unquote, remote wilderness areas that have maintained high biodiversity because they haven't yet been disturbed, unquote. And who is doing the mining? Well, let's just say that it's not all going to be union workers with union protections. Amnesty International paints a disturbing picture. Quote, the marketings of the state-of-the-art technologies are in a stark contrast to the children carrying bags of rocks, unquote. My response is simple. Again, this is a red herring argument. The main element you refer to is cobalt. It is a troublesome element for the battery industry. Finding new sources for that element should be top priority, and I think we both agree on that. So, to help you better understand this problem, take a look at the presentation from Tesla's Battery Day 2020. Cobalt is going the way of the dinosaur in EV batteries over the next 4 to 5 years. Additionally, there's a source for lithium enough for the next 2 centuries right here in the good old USA. It requires extracting the lithium from clay. It is like extracting oil, fracking from shale, which you fully support, Mark. The source is only a hop, skip, and a jump from the Gigafactory in Nevada. And do you think that was a happy accident? No, it wasn't. 2, there are many different forms of mining: tunneling, stripping, and gashing. Some forms of mining are more invasive than others. And I will bet you have no problem with strip mining for coal or drilling for oil. The only difference here is the elements mined for solar and batteries are up to 95% recyclable. This means the amount of mining will decrease over time, and using these elements does not put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, especially when mined with renewable electrical energy. So there is mining involved in either process. My question is, which one makes more sense? Again, I think everybody knows the answer to that question. It's the one where mining actually decreases over time, not increase. And finally, we land on one of my favorite comments by Mark. He derails his own argument. He says, and then the mining itself requires massive amounts of conventional energy, as do the energy-intensive industrial processes needed to refine the materials and then build the wind, solar, and battery hardware. My response to this statement is very simple. All mining requires the use of massive amounts of conventional energy to begin with, as I alluded to in my opening statements. Conventional energy should always be used expeditiously over the next couple of decades to help wean the world from conventional energy usage. It is like weaning an addict from a serious drug abuse. Sometimes you have to use the actual drug to help them stop using the drug you want them to stop using. By using the conventional energy in this manner, we will decrease to zero over time as mining tools that rely on renewable energy are integrated into that process. Only one type of mining will allow that amount to decrease over time, and that would be mining for elements that can be used to create energy and motion without the use of carbon-based fuels going forward. Now for the best red herring yet. He says, then there's the waste. Wind turbines, solar panels, and batteries have a relatively short life, about 20 years. Conventional energy machines like gas turbines last twice as long. My response is simple. Your video has been full of red herrings, so why stop now? First, you are not taking into account the amount of carbon dioxide that is pouring into the atmosphere from the conventional energy sources. Second, the conventional energy, while seemingly plentiful today, is finite. It will run out at some point. Third, you can recycle about 90 to 95% of the elements used in the solar and battery technology today. You can never recycle the burned oil or coal used in conventional energy systems. It only pollutes. Period. As for the pollution put into our land, how can one choose the land over the air or water? You have not mentioned either air or water thus far. The fact is, we need clean land, air, and water. Conventional energy systems do not help the air. Carbon dioxide and other heavy metals or elements are always dumped into the air. Or water, where hexavalent chromium pollution from coal ash in the vast underground reservoirs is poisoning our nation. And finally, short life? That is another asserted conclusion. There are solar panels today that are over 40 years old that are still making power. There are windmills on this earth that have been turning longer than America has existed as a country. Tesla cars that were made in 2012 are still running strong, some with over 500,000 miles and no battery change. Like the legendary Don Quixote, you're just tilting at windmills now. Pun intended. But wait, there's more from Mark. He goes on to say, and I quote, with current plans, the International Renewable Energy Agency calculates that by 2050, the disposal of worn-out solar panels will constitute over double the tonnage of all today's global plastic waste. Worn-out wind turbines and batteries will add millions of tons more waste. It will be a whole new environmental challenge. I think this is almost a whale of a red herring. There's an old adage, you should pick the lesser of two evils. Pick the one that causes the least damage. The current environmental challenges are deadly. They will result in people dying. You insist that plastic isn't recyclable. Seriously? Plastic is one of the better elements for recycling. As for batteries, 90% or more of the material will be reused, and the same is true for solar. We could waste years going back and forth on the red herrings that you've tossed about in this video. The question is, why are you doing this? And I want to go on. He then goes on to say, and I quote, "Before we launch history's biggest increase in mining, dig up millions of acres in pristine areas, encourage childhood labor, and create epic waste problems, we might want to consider our almost inexhaustible supply of hydrocarbons, the fuels that make our marvelous world possible." My response is simple. Mark, did you hear yourself? Inexhaustible supply of hydrocarbons? Seriously. And what about the waste from those hydrocarbons? Carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, hexavalent chromium, mercury. The list can go on and on. Those four elements alone will kill millions, if not billions of people over the next 50 to 100 years. And they will provide the world with an inexhaustible supply of other life-threatening chemicals and elements that cannot be easily removed from the environment. Mark then adds the final nail in his custom-built anti-green coffin. He says, "Technology is making it easier to acquire them and cleaner to use them every day." Talking about hydrocarbons. The following comparisons are typical and instructive. It costs about the same to drill one oil well as it does to build one giant wind turbine. And while that turbine generates the energy equivalent of about 1 barrel of oil per hour, the oil rig produces 10 barrels per hour. It costs less than 50 cents to store a barrel of oil or its equivalent in natural gas. But you need $200 worth of batteries to hold the energy contained in 1 barrel. Well, my response to this one is going to be precious. It costs less than 50 cents to store a barrel of oil or its equivalent in natural gas. But that barrel of oil or its equivalent in natural gas is gone. And you have to store another one, and another one, and another one. And pretty soon it adds up to well more than $200 worth of batteries needed to contain the energy in 1 barrel of oil. So that's a huge red herring, and it's a huge lie. I noticed that you carefully left solar out of this picture too. Each solar panel generates about 250 to 330 watts per panel. These panels last 20 to 40 or more years. The electronics that control these systems are generational, lasting if maintained properly for decades. The infrastructure is the house, so no concrete or steel is needed for the installation. And for giggles, you add a Tesla Powerwall to help with overnight storage of electricity. Expected longevity of the Powerwall is 15 years. And recyclable? It is, yes. 90 to 95% of the materials in the Powerwall can be recycled. The cost to the environment? As I've previously stated, responsible mining always leads to land restoration. Additionally, the elements needed for solar are readily available, and some are a byproduct of smelting. The cost of moving, refining, delivering, and selling the fossil fuels you tout as inexhaustible are not included in your estimates, nor are the effects of burning the non-renewable energy sources of coal, oil, and gas. These effects are immeasurably bigger and more dangerous than anything used to create solar or wind energy. The fact is, carbon dioxide is real, and increasing hexavalent chromium is found in the drinking water surrounding almost every single coal-burning plant in the entire world. These evil chemicals do more long-term harm to the earth and its inhabitants than mining for minerals that make solar panels will ever do. Building and recycling batteries is easy. Larger battery storage solutions are just around the corner. And things are improving, and all you have to do is watch the improvements that were shown on Tesla's Battery Day 2020, 2021, and 2022, and soon in 2023. These are not asserted conclusions. These are scientific facts that can be tested, measured, and implemented today. And I love the way when Mark tries to be green in his final dig. He says, "Next time someone tells you that wind, solar, and batteries are the magical solution for all our energy needs, ask them if they have any idea of the cost to the environment." Mark, Are you serious? You conveniently did not address the cost of coal, oil, and gas to the environment. You did so as your final red herring. Sort of like the big corporate bosses in the movie Avatar. The only thing that you're missing is a putter and a golf ball and the nasty attitude of the main character. Mark's parting sarcastic line is simple, and I'm going to quote it. Quote unquote, "Unobtainium works fine in the movies, but we don't live in the movies. We live in the real world." I'm Mark Mills, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Prager University. My closing questions for Mark are simple. Mark, Mr. Mills, have you ever taken money from the oil, gas, or coal industry? I know you have because I do live in the real world. I've traced the sources of the funding for your videos and your paycheck in general. While your video is professional and passionate, it's just not right. It is one-sided, it is nearsighted, and most importantly, it is dishonest on many fronts. So I'm going to finalize my response in this video like this. For me, this is not a political issue. The issue of renewable energy should not be political. It has to be based on facts, common sense, and compassion. And I will not make politics a part of the equation, but I will say this. I believe in the rights of the individual. I also believe in the full volume and meaning of the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights. I wholly support and believe in free speech. In fact, as a veteran, I gave 20 years of my life to ensure free speech is something we can all enjoy. I believe that we have the right to express our opinions, but we do not have the right to spread disinformation on a massive scale like you've done in your video. We do not have the right to present only one side of an argument because that's what you've done in your video. It must be both sides, and I have balanced it out with my video. However, when it comes to common sense and energy usage, we all, conservative and liberal alike, must take a collective deep breath and sit down and get about the business of cleaning up what God has given us. Your let's drill and burn approach is old school, short-sighted, and quite frankly very disturbing. I would suggest you examine your position on the true renewable energy sources that are out there without using the same old tired talking points that we've been fed for decades. I am Jim. This is my Bolty UV, and I have no association with Prager University. I do have degrees in meteorology, natural science, and business, so I'm not your average green activist. I'm a compassionate conservative with a firm grounding in reality. And finally, to answer the question posed by the video that inspired my response today, what's wrong with wind and solar? Absolutely nothing. That is, unless you're bought and paid for by the special interest groups of oil, natural gas, and coal. If you're passionate enough to make the world a better place, join me by making this video go viral. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week. Remember to subscribe, share, comment, and like. And if you want to know when I've uploaded something new, hit the notification bell. Remember, treat everyone with kindness, put a smile on your face, and help someone today. And pay it forward when someone does the same for you. Again, thanks for stopping by. See you soon, or somewhere along the route from point A to point B. Take it easy, everybody. Thank you.